Well, hello one and hello all, and good afternoon to all of you on the face of the world. What an honor, what a privilege again to be meeting together here on your channel, before and after, right here in Zimbabwe, Harare, deep in the south, here in Zimbabwe. What an honor, what a joy to be alive again. What a time, as we are building the African narrative. We cannot build this narrative alone. We are going to be working together. And thank you very much, Farai Matiwenga, for joining us this afternoon on this channel. And when you are writing, as you are joining us, please tell us where you are on the face of the earth. Tell us where you are calling us from. I see California is in the house. I'm first today. That is Farai. Yes, you are first one today. And please tell us where you are. Which part of the world are you keeping telling us from? Yes, Chudi Chirundu, you can tell us where you are. You are sending us the message from also. Let's just greet each other. Enough of fighting and swearing at each other. And you don't have to be saying the same story over and over again. I heard what you said about my political conversations. Mzansi is in the house. California is in the house. Limpopo is in the house. Mulibwanji, right there in Lusaka, is in the house. Nigeria, Ndewo, right there in Nigeria. Sanbonan Wakangwenya, Sianbulisa. Greetings to those from the Queensland, right in Manchester, the United Kingdom there. Northwest, Vurmaranstad, yes, on your way to Northern Cape there. Dumelang in Lesotho, hello in Australia, and in Kunene in Swaziland, Kwandebele, how Kwandebele Bakoneka, South Sudan, Rustenburg, Mr. Mkubana, and the rest of you. Oh, Spain is in the house, Zambia is in the house, Turkey, right there in Istanbul. I flew past there when I was on my way into the United Kingdom some couple of years ago. Cameroon is in the house. Naivasha in Kenya, that's Mr. Gathara Wahome. We bring you greetings also. The list is endless. We have more than 200 plus people here, and I will not be able to finish. Oh, Marikana, that brings some emotions right there in Marikana there. And please, all feel welcome. With your representations from various parts. I was in Lesotho a week ago. In the Butabute, right there in Lesotho. It's a pleasure and a great joy to meet up all of you. Chama Pinduza, right there in Tanzania. Mr. Kabari Kitoa, watching from Juba. That must be in Sudan. And I'm happy to see you also. And many people, you want to challenge me also. I don't have a problem. You can set up a platform on your platform, invite me as a guest on your space, and you can come and have a conversation with me there. And I want to explain something very, very fundamental and important today that will set the record straight. I've been thinking of doing this video now for the past couple of weeks, and I was wondering when would be the right time to say it and clear up the air so that people don't get confused as to why am I saying what I'm saying and where am I coming from when I relate some of the stories that I relate. What has not only caused me to come into Zimbabwe and leave South Africa, but in the midst of that, what also is the background which informs that narrative. So just hold on your comments. Those of you who want to tell me about ZANU-PF and MDC and my political comments, just hold on your comments a little bit. Hear me first. Let me say my story, and then we can comment on my story. And yes, I hear people already worked up before I even say anything. Can you just hold on your political comments about MDC and ZANU-PF? Hear me out first. Hear me out. Let me say my story, and then we can critique that story And for now, just tell us where you are watching the program from. It will suffice. Until I'm done with my story, Desire Takunda. Chimbomira ndimbopedza kutaura kana ndapedza kutaura. Chikutu. I understand. Just hold on your comments about ZANU-PF and MDC. Let me say my story. Let me state my story. And after my story, then you can comment on some facts that I will have been able to share with you. And yes, Farai Mativenga, I understand you're angry. Hold your anger. Hold your anger. Anger has its house in the bosom of fools. You don't need to be angry yet before you hear even what I have to say. Just hang in there. I passed some comments in the last few days, and I want to put clarity to those comments. And the background that I'm coming to you from is a life that begins off in the late 60s. I am the firstborn son of Lazarus Maponga, born in a family of 11 sons and 6 daughters. My father is number 6 in that family. And my grandfather, his name is Mara-Rah, Maponga Munyuki. Joshua was his Christian name. He had 2 brothers. Maponga himself, with the father of my father, my grandfather. He had 2 brothers that I want to introduce to you. The first brother, his name was called Magonde. Magonde and Maponga, same blood. And that also included a gentleman which is known to some of you by the name of Tongogara. Tongogara, Magonde, and Maponga. Our grandmother moved with his children from the greater Soshe tribe, the dynasty of the Soshe, and they moved over into the Masingo region to start up a new life from there. And my grandfather was involved in the World War II, and yes, he had a gun actually from the German War. And when the farms were being sold across Bikita, that's when he bought his farm in Bikita there. So Magonde is my uncle, and Tongogara is my uncle. And early in the 1970s, 74, 75, when war started breeding and brewing up in Zimbabwe, my father and his brother, Mike Maponga, who is known to some of you, Mr. Zundeman or Deferenza, the big Adventist preacher, they used to live in Chilonga, in Chibukedziwa, Chilonga, yes, Komatsiba Mele, if I remember very well. That's when my first language that I could speak actually as a young boy was Shangan. And while they were there, when war broke out, I remember my uncle being picked up by the South African soldiers who were coming in from the South African border to fight the wars in the Zimbabwean space, but they will come through Chilonga area. And helicopters, I remember I was still a very young boy. I remember helicopters coming past our homestead, looking for my parents and looking for my uncles. And they took him away. He should have been killed, actually, because he came back bleeding with his arms shot. If you look into his arm very correctly, you find that he actually still has the scar on his hand. That big preacher that you know, Mike Maponga. And then they moved away from Chilonga, Chibukedziwa, Boli area. Those of you might want to refer and reference the history. And then they moved to some moved back into Bikita at the grandfather's farm. Some moved over into Triangle. That's where I did part of my primary school, in Kyle School in Triangle. And if these are lies that I'm telling you, Mr. Tendai Mutuda, just be quiet a little bit. Just be quiet. Don't lose your temper. I don't have time to look for it. You want to hear my story? I'll tell you my story. Because you cannot tell my story when I'm here. I can tell you my story myself. So I moved over into Triangle, where I did part of my primary school while we were there. And we were staying together with the Chirobes. The Chirobes are actually our blood cousins. And Baba Stella, the Tiberius, and the Enochs, and the other boys that might be familiar to some of you guys. And BZ, Randasara, the big preacher that you might know also, whose young brother is in Kosiabo Zundasara. He used to actually to be part of our household in our homestead. And it is during those days that my father started working in the underground movement of the then liberation struggle, which was happening in Mozambique. And I remember nights would not go past. We would all gather together in his bedroom there, and we were listening to Radio Frelimo, broadcasting from Maputo. And I remember very well listening to songs by some of the Chingas, and listening to songs of liberation by the Mapfumos and the rest of the guys. But the voice from Mozambique was strong. I'd already experienced war a little bit from the Chilonga area. So when I heard, and I'd seen the white people already, they used to come around with their faces painted with those black paints and harassing our parents and beating them up. And so when we started to hear these songs coming out from Mozambique to the liberation of Zimbabwe, it is then, by the time I was doing grade 4, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, I started to hear the songs of the great liberation that were coming from Mozambique. And my father was involved. Lazarus Maponga himself, he is still alive. My father is still alive. Those of you who might want to do your further research, I would suggest that you go to him and reference. But I want to share my story. I want to share my story as to how do I end up where I am, thinking the way I am thinking. And he started recruiting some of the soldiers, some of the young men, to proceed and go to Mozambique for war. He was the Secretary General in the Chirezi, Lowveld area, Triangle, Buffalo Range, and the Hippo Valley, those areas. And he was collecting clothes and food and sending it over to Mozambique. And the Smith regime caught up with him, and he was put on the death row at the Buffalo Range, prison. And I remember for weeks and months on end, my mother riding her bicycle to the prison to go and give food to my father. He was released on the amnesty of 1979. You can go and reference this information for yourself. That's when they picked him up from prison on that amnesty of 1979, to which we moved into Chimanimani, Meloseta, Mandidzuzura, on your way to Honda Valley there. And when we got there, we were unfortunate because that's the time when the Mozambican Wanamatsanga were beginning to run into Zimbabwe. And you'd remember that time was quite a brutal time because some of those guys from Mozambique started killing and destroying. And even they came to our farm, and my mom was threatened with death a couple of times. My father found a school for me in Meloseta Primary School so that I could finish up my primary school because there was no primary school doing grade 5 and grade 6 at the farm. So I ended up learning with my brother Davis, who was the firstborn son of Uncle Mike. They rented a small little room for us there where we were staying, and we would walk home every Friday about 25 kilometers. That is from the town going back to Boscat Farm in Chimanimani next to Peacock there. And every Sunday would pick up some refreshments and would walk back, would then ride back to go to school. At the collapse of war and independence in because I cannot miss another part there again, we would go home on holidays, and it was at the peak of war in Bikita. I saw the war in Wedza. I saw the war in Bambaninga, the Odzi area, the bombings that were done there by the whites, and the literal gunshots that were exchanged between our old soldiers, such as Rex Nongo, such as Musa, that was her name of Mrs. Mjuru, if you might remember her, and other comrades that were there. We were the Mjiba boys who were running with information from the rivers to the comrades. Were the ones who were coordinating the meetings for the Pungwe. The Pungwe was the meetings that the guerrillas, as they used to be holding in the nights, and we'll be there sharing information. I'm coming from the river. I've seen your cattle. I've seen your cows. There are so many bulls. There are so many cows there. They have so many horns. They have chariots and etc. And all this was intelligence, because we're informing them. We have seen the soldiers' camps. They have bazookas there. There are white people. There are so many white people there. There are so many black people there, and etc. So we worked, as it were, to also put our shoulder into the liberation struggle. And we have seen also, and I was there, when some of the students from Tugui School, some of the students from, the neighboring Bikita schools were rounded up by soldiers, and some of them were hung up on the wires, on the choppers, and they would fly around the farms, warning us that if we go to war, this is what they would do to us. They would spread these papers and fly them all around our farms to deter us from going to war also. And I still remember Mr. Mercado's farm was next door to our farm. And the day when the brothers of the Mercado family were actually gunned down from their own family. Our farm is literally 500 meters away from Mercado's farm. I can't remember, of course, the death of Mr. Lunga, the old man, an old blind man, and was blind and deaf as he was walking away from seeing his friend, my grandfather, and the South African and the Smith regime soldiers actually gunned him down. Before the age of 10, I'd already seen dead people. We dragged our uncles, we dragged our relatives into shallow graves. At that early age, the trauma was high, and my school was interrupted, actually, even when the soldiers came to our school. I still remember very well, the headmaster was Mr. Mazambara himself, and we're singing at the assembly, and we saw these big trucks bellowing into the school. We ran and disappeared into the bushes. We would spend 2 to 3 days at length, sometimes not even knowing where our parents were, and we would gather up again, and it was a horrible time. I experienced the war in that fashion. And until 1980, the collapse of the war, then I moved over into Solusi. That was the 1982 when I started to do my high school studies with all good friends at a mission station called Solusi. That's where Albert Lutuli, the first president of ANC, was actually born, at that Solusi mission. That's where I also went to school. And with the leaders all around Africa, I had a chance of meeting up people from Ethiopia, people from Zambia, from Malawi, people from Uganda, Swaziland, Tanzania. That's where I met up Pastor Ngwenyas, the Justice Mongwes, the Gametes, the Leonard Mbazas, the Wamalikas, the Mukomas in Zambia, the Makeletas, the what called Kazembes from Congo, Tulahanyo Lifuko from Botswana, and the entire Southern Hemisphere. So, and I started to hear again this Pan-African voice within our academic space as college students. As students would be sharing their stories around the African space and the pain that they were going through in their various areas. And boom, 1983, 1984, when the Gukurahundi story erupted in the Matabeleland. Remember, Solusi is right in the deep of the southern part of the country. And as the war and the destabilization happened in Matabeleland, people would actually be running from Matabeleland, coming through Solusi College. And some of the parents of the students who were at school, they were actually on foot running into Bulawayo. I experienced that. This is from my mother's side. These are the Ndebeles, the Zulus, who came up with Mzilikazi up in the 1800s. So I could not understand at that age. We'd just come out from a war that I thought was a national war. Now here I am in the South, and I began to experience what I might want to call a tribal war, almost a tribal insurgents of unproportional and destabilizing homes, and even disturbing and destabilizing our school, as it were. And the reality was felt deeply, because this politics, which was happening at the national platform, started to filter its way into our academic and our school space, as the difference between the Shonas and the Ndebeles started to be felt within the very school that we were living in. It meant that some of the staff members who started to act impartial to some of us, they started causing scars. I will not mention names, for many of them are still alive and they are parents to people that you know. But we started to experience this, as it were. And it is in the midst of that rowdy space that I started to grow up and shaping up and understanding my own political position and my own, cultural connections to the tribes that were at war. That is Shangani, the Ndebeles, the Shonas, and the Vendas, and the Nambias, and the Kalangas, and etc. All of whom were meeting at a school space. So it started shaping up while I was studying theology on the other side, which was aligning me to love your enemies and pray for those that are persecuting you. But within my school space, I started to experience this struggle, and I experienced it greatly. I had my own problem with my academic institution, to issues of insubordination, issues of war, strikes at school, and other things like that. So I'm not new to controversy. I was suspended from school a number of times, and for insubordination and working against the system and driving against the tide of popular sentiments and popular theology. By the time I finished training and I went into my pastoral work, I was zealous and excited, and I wanted to transform the church so that the young people can have a voice in the church, so that the church should stop abusing the people and collecting its offerings and monies and shipping them to the West and etc., and give the African children an opportunity to converse with themselves. Above all, I was interested in indigenization, in enculturization, and in contextualization of the very theology that I had studied, and now I'd become a graduate of the same academic institution. And I should say, at a very early age, that also put me in conflict, direct conflict with the church. The conflict with the church did not begin now with the letter that was written by Pastor Ngwaru when I was in South Africa. I started having conflict with the church as early as 1991, 1992, on the very same issues that I'm raising now as an old man that I wanted to be resolved. I worked in Zimbabwe here for a couple of years, and then after that, I moved over into South Africa because I wanted to go and further my studies. My father did not have enough money to make me finish up my graduate and my doctorate school. So I came to South Africa through the invitation from Pastor Mongo, my friend of mine in Johannesburg, who shared me with Pastor Ngwenya in Durban. And I worked a bit, raised some money. Then I moved into Swaziland and worked there for a couple of years. Yes. And from Swaziland, I moved back into Durban, worked for 2-3 years. That's when I was working for EDSA and some of the entrepreneur development programs there under Public Works to develop emerging contractors. And then later on, I moved over into the UK. That was around year 1998, 99, 2000. I was in and out of Britain and South Africa. Ultimately, I decided to take up my bags and move my family up into the UK, and where I lived for the next 4 to 5 years between 99, 2000 and 2004, 2005, when I packed up my bags and I came back to South Africa. And in my stay in London, I again developed a problem because I've created an organization, African Sabbath. Some of you might know it. It's still running in London there, Manchester, Birmingham, Sussex, South Brighton, and etc., where we're mobilizing university students, and so that we could begin to have an African worship experience within the London space. And I got in trouble with the London conference there, the South British Conference, whatever, and they wrote nasty articles about me that I'm a relegate pastor from my own conference. I've been chased away and I'm causing chaos in the British Union here, and etc. To which I said, man, it's enough. I've served my purpose here in London. And I made good friends in London, by the way. Musiwas and Pastor Nigel, I can't forget him. Pastor Nugent, I can't forget him, and many others, from Willesden Church to Chingford to Birmingham Church to Sussex, Essex, Oxford, and experienced also, quote unquote, the first world life. I packed up my bags and came back to South Africa, and I worked with Untata Umandla Msimang in the company called Vision Design, where we were doing brand management for the post office services, transforming the post office to where it is now, from the colonial post office to the new regime, the new modern post offices. You find it. And I was responsible for building the Kilani Mall post office. I built up the Canal Wharf in Cape Town. I built up the Tokai one in Cape Town. I built up the Green Acres, the Green Fields in Port Elizabeth. I built up the Vincent one. I built up the Mkuze one, and even the one in Pinetown, the Pinetown Post Office. Those are some of the projects that I was directly involved in terms of the transformation. At the expiry of that contract, then I started to build up the consulting space. The church could not take me in because of my record. So there was a bit of controversy there. Around 2008, 2009, I decided, no, let me go back to church. So I started up an organization called V2V, Vessel to Vessel, which was a Sabbath church, but we were worshiping on Saturday afternoons, which caused havoc within the Adventist community, at home and away. Again, I found myself in direct conflict with the church as to why am I beginning to incite movement within a movement? Why am I organizing these young people to do worship differently from what the mainstream is doing? Other people told me, no. You don't have to open your own church. You must work from inside. You must work from within the system and etc. But I just decided I'll organize a parallel system that would challenge the main system. And we fought that battle to and fro. If you can scroll back on my page here, from year 2008 to 2011, 2012, you would find the same quality of writing and insults that I'm now experiencing when I am back in Zimbabwe. They used also to write like that. I was called a demon. I was called a backslider. I was called a satanist. I was called a sellout. I had made a wrong decision. I had bad judgment. I had lost my faith. I had become pagan, and I was not even worth to be called one of the Christians because what I was doing was not in line with the mainstream thinking of the system. I saw it and I said, let me do it. I succumbed to pressure at the end of 2012 or so, and said, let me close it down and let me try something else, to which I started writing my books and doing my consulting. I met up with the Nkosi brothers around 2015, I think 15, 16, and boom, we started another organization again called, this one was not Vessel to Vessel, this one was called Cities of Refuge, where again I wanted to create a meeting space for all Christians, from Pentecostals to mainstream Christianity and African indigenous churches, because I'd already started thinking into that space. I'd already started thinking into the space of an amalgamated, all-inclusive religious space where the religious conversation needed to happen, but needed to happen with an African voice. We ran that organization for about 2 years or so. We had a fallout with the partnerships that were there, and I folded and again during that moment, from 2014 to 2017, 18, I received more insults and more insults to the wrong decisions that I am making. I am mixing, these are Adventists talking, I am mixing with non-believers. I am mixing with witches. I am mixing with Pentecostals. I have become a pagan, and I've become a non-believer, a sellout, and a barbarian, and what. I was an impersonification of the devil himself. You have become a devil because you don't agree with what we are talking about as an organization. I put my thumbs up. I folded that Cities of Refuge and left it in the hands of the partners, and I walked. And then I focused primarily on my scholarship in terms of writing my books and understanding African cultural and African indigenous knowledge systems and religions from 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19. That's when I started literally, because I was out of the system and I was robust, but the church would still use me here and there to come and preach and do some DASA conferences and other individual prayer meetings in various churches, which I did. And I did because I'm born from here. I'm a third generation from this church. So I thought I would contribute into that direction. It is this time that saw me visiting various people of various and diverse faiths. I aligned myself with some Muslim communities. I aligned myself with African indigenous communities, African royal houses, and African indigenous healing systems. I even found myself on one occasion sitting with the old man Credo Mutwa himself as I was writing the book, Going Places in the Spirit, which we have now improved to be called Finding Your Truth. And because I now wanted to speak the African voice with African understanding. And I said, and in the midst of me now meeting Wotata Credo Mutwa, meeting the traditional healers in Drakensberg, meeting the traditional healers in KwaZulu-Natal, in Swaziland, in Mpumalanga, and beginning to write about some of these experiences. If you're drinking blood of a human being and they're drinking the blood of a chicken, who is pagan here? If you are baptizing when a man accepts Jesus and they're also baptizing after a man has been initiated, what's the difference? If they are burning pepper this side and they're also burning pepper this side, what is the difference? And I wanted to find out the areas of common understanding. And in the midst of that, the Christian community stood up in arms, both mainstream and Pentecostal and etc. I received more insults. I received more insults. I had lost my way and I had lost my path. But what is funny, it is that as people are growing, you meet different types of challenges. But all I'm trying to say in one sentence, I'm not a stranger to conflict. I'm not a stranger to insults. I'm not a stranger to marginalization. I have lived all my life in conflict with whoever the system is. I come back now. Before I come back here, I make a video the other day as to why am I going back to Zimbabwe. Because the South African community is busy commenting like you are commenting also. Please go back to your country. Stop telling us you're rubbish. We're not interested in you involved in South African politics. Go back and fix Zimbabwe. And I accept the challenge. And I said, I will go back to Zimbabwe. I can categorically state today, for your own consumption, sorry for the bad news for some of you who wish me bad luck. I was not deported from South Africa. It's a lie for those who don't like me and want to perpetuate a narrative that I'm a refugee in South Africa. I came into South Africa in 1992. I am not an illegal immigrant. I have all my passports with my visa stamps that are in them, extensions and extensions and extensions, until I got my permanent resident status in South Africa. And I was not deported. I flew out of South Africa last week. I'll be flying back in there again anytime. I am free to travel. It's not true that I have a fake ID document. My ID number ends with 188. My ID is written Zimbabwean. I don't want to be a South African. Let me put that on record. I don't want to be a South African. Now, the South African community, some of the South African community say I must go back home and talk what I'm talking from my own country, because the narrative that I'm promoting does not fit their common narrative. And I accept and I come to Zimbabwe. When I walk into Zimbabwe, the conflict that I come here and find is that some of the Zimbabwean community and I'll say, you must go back to South Africa. We don't want to hear your story. Because the narrative that is there, which is not correct, number one, it is that the country can only be liberated through one avenue. And that one avenue has been trying to work on this liberation struggle for the past 20 years. And anyone who has another different idea as to how to deal with this problem, either they don't have brains, or they are stupid, or they are not worth listening to. Because the only brains that are in the country are the MDC brains. And there's also a misnotion that says all the old people that are in ZANU cannot think. And ZANU is an old age home of old croaky dogs who are waiting to exhale. Well, my history is not written in MDC. The history that I faced is written in national politics. I felt the pinch of oppression during the days of struggle. My father was in the struggle. And when he left the jail, he went straight into church and wanted nothing to do with politics ever again. It's only till recently that he has started getting involved in some political activity. When I walk into this political terrain, yes, I had come up with a strategy initially that I was going to open up an organization called Zim Indigenous Movement, which I was going to run as a parallel system. But remember, I already have experience from V2V. I already have experience from cities of refuge, from my denominational corner, as to what happens when you put in a parallel system to the main system. Will you be able to succeed? Maybe yes. Do you have the resources to drive that? Maybe no. Do you create enemies while you're doing that? Yes. Can you be able to sustain this? Maybe yes, and maybe no. So in the midst of that, I had to sit down and put my mind together. How best do I approach this system? The only way to get this done was to look. The reason why I was calling Chamisa for the past 5 years, wanting to talk to him, I wanted to find out what was on his manifesto. What are the issues that he wants to address in terms of changing the narrative of Zimbabwean politics? So I simply wanted to look and say, what is MDC going to do about land? What are they going to do about power? What are they going to do about education? What are they going to do about the colonial businesses that are on the land? What are they going to do about the issues of Matabeleland? What are they going to do? So I had a whole list of questions that I wanted to throw on the MDC table and say, how are you going to respond to these things as a political party from Tsvangirai to Chamisa? And when the whole wrangle of the party came in and the divisions, it even made it more complicated. Because I think maybe one reason he did not come back to me, he had enough internal politics that he was struggling with, and I don't think he had time for me as an external one. So I reached out to His Excellency, the President of the country, looking for the National Development Plan. What is it that you have in the pipeline in terms of alleviating poverty, dealing with unemployment, and addressing the issues of youth? The copy of which I received. I'm not saying ZANU-PF does not have problems. They have enough problems as much as MDC has problems. But I'm coming into a space where I've been away for 20 years. And I cannot just come here and start running amok and doing whatever I want to do. I need to come here and understand the politics of the land in which I'm moving into. So I looked for the National Development Plan, National Development Strategy, which I received. I began to isolate the programs that I think that the youth and the community can benefit from. And this is the community. This is not MDC. This is not ZANU-PF. These are Zimbabweans who are going to benefit from this program. So if an airport, if a road, if a farm, whatever it is was going to be fixed in the country, it was not going to come as a benefit only to one tribal group. It was coming as a benefit to the entire nation. Then I wanted to understand myself as, where do I put my effort? Do I put my effort in terms of fighting the system to deliver? Or do I put my effort in working with the system to deliver on the objectives that they had already outlined in their National Development Plan, to which I opted for the latter? Let me pick up the things that they have agreed as government, that they are going to implement 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and hold the government accountable to their own promises, and hold MDC accountable to their own jurisdiction. I find no conflict in that. If you want to say you have lost your path, or I have lost my step, I am as sober as a fiddle. I don't need to understand some of you who say I've lost respect in you. You have never respected me from the time I started my ministry. You never respected me when I did my theology. You never respected me when I did my social and cultural studies. You never respected me when I opened up other organizations. To make it worse, you have never even bought a single book from me to promise me that you've given me any money. The rumors that are going around that I'm receiving money and I'm being paid for what I'm doing, it's not true. What I have done is set up a media space in Zimbabwe through which we're going to now pick up Zimbabwe's narrative and make it an African narrative. And while we are solving the Zimbabwean problems, I hope by the end of my life, I would have placed it on a table where there will be a blueprint of how does a modern generation transform its own society and build the future that it wants for its own children. We cannot give back land to the white people again. No, that will not happen. We cannot go back on some of those. And all other African countries that don't have land in their hands, they must know they're still not liberated until the African has land, has access to production, has access to farming, has access to mining, has access to housing, accommodation, traveling, and roads. You cannot talk democracy and talk liberation and sing stupid national anthems when you don't own your land in your hands. And now that Zimbabwe has land in its own hands, the next question I have for ZANU-PF, what are you going to do with that land? The land that is sitting in the hands of political leaders who are not able to utilize that land. That land must be taken away from the political leaders and be given to the young people, be given to the farmers who can create food out of those farms. I'm not confused in my mission in life. I'm not confused in my desire in life. I'm not confused in what I want to spend my life in. The life of the nation is far much important than the stupid politicking that we do here, fighting each other as small little political parties. We all know very well, until the economy is in the hands of the Africans, there's no subject we can talk about in terms of opposition leaders, because all opposition leaders are sponsored by colonial systems. And until Africans own the means of productions, they cannot be able to influence the political environment in which they are working in. And secondly, I will not pass here before I pass a comment to the South African community who are harassing the Zimbabweans who are in South Africa, saying Zimbabweans must go back to their country. Good news for you. The Zimbabweans can come back to their country as you are chasing them away. But remember, while you are doing that, we have more than 65, if not 120 South African companies that are working in Zimbabwe. 60 to 70 companies that are working in Zimbabwe. Can you tell me, South African, how many Zimbabwean companies are in South Africa? How many Zimbabwean companies are in South Africa? On the contrary, how many South African companies are in Zimbabwe? Now you want to play this game of you do this and we do this. So if you say Zimbabweans must go back home, maybe it's time also we close down Pick and Pay. Maybe it's time also we close one of your biggest companies that is here, that is Zimplats. Maybe it's time also we close down all these British, Dutch, Afrikaner shops that are lying to the country, to South Africa. I'll tell you how. They open Pick and Pay here, they open a Pick and Pay in South Africa, they make money in Zimbabwe, and they transfer that money to a South African bank, smuggling millions of dollars from the Zimbabwean economy, feeding the South African government. This is a fact, including Zimplats, which is aligned to your platinum mines in Marikana there. They are robbing Zimbabwe of billions of dollars, transferring money between companies, between the South African company and the Zimbabwean money. And Zimbabwe is losing billions of dollars to South African criminal businesses that are not declaring that money and profiting the business of the country. And you want to tell us that Zimbabwe is poor? We can also take these businesses and make them indigenous. So the problem we are dealing with right now, we are not dealing with white people as a problem. We are dealing with South African companies, some of them hiding on the faces of black men in South Africa, who are ripping off Zimbabwean economy, benefiting South African economy. And much of the deposits, I have it on record, more than 20 to 30% of your bank deposits in your country are coming from foreign accounts, and Zimbabwe is 70 to 80% contributor of that budget. So South Africa is building itself. We've gone through apartheid. Now we are being abused by fellow Africans who are hiding behind multinational conglomerates, smuggling money out of this country, and they still stand to say Zimbabwe must be in sanctions. But while they're in sanctions, they are stealing money from the economy. And to some of the simple people at the bottom, yes, you can say ZANU-PF is allowing that, but what do you do when the laws of the land are saying when you open up a business, this is how it runs? And yes, I'm not refusing that. Some of the ZANU-PF leaders are equally caught up in this mess where the corruption is happening and kickbacks are going into the pockets of some of these people at the expense of the greater community. And I say no to that. It is not right. It is not right that as South Africans, you can shout across the border, calling us Makwere, we must go back home. But yet you know that your country is milking this country dry. A great percentage of the diamonds on the Kimberlite right now as we speak are not South African diamonds. They are Zimbabwean and Congo diamonds. A great percentage of the gold right now on your gold refineries in South Africa is not South African gold. It is Zimbabwe gold. I'll tell you why. Your South African mines in South Africa have gone too deep now. Mining has become too expensive. Zimbabwe is still on open cast mining. It's cheaper to run. South African companies are digging gold here. And when they are not digging it, they are smuggling it out of here, supporting the South African Stock Exchange. And you say you don't want a relationship with Zimbabwe? Zimbabweans must come back home? Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right that Zimbabweans must come back home. But when they come back home, under such circumstances, you can only read the writing on the wall. That Zimbabwe is 60% shareholder of your market share when it comes to export. We consume 60% of South African products. You want to start that war? We can import our oil from Kenya. We can import our oils from Tanzania. We can import our oils straight from Sudan through Mozambique Beira. Sasol will close down. Total will close down. Engen will close down. Those very jobs that you're talking about are not sustainable because the South African economy is not in the hands of the black people. So I want the South African people to start thinking. Start thinking. Stop being pepped up by political slogans which are driven by the white ideologies. We are brothers. And half of you shouting Zimbabweans must go home, you are children of migrant laborers from Mozambique, migrant laborers from Zambia, migrant laborers from Malawi, from Botswana, from Swaziland, from Lesotho. You would rather kill your own uncles, your own brothers in the name of our economy. Do you have an economy in South Africa? Do you have an economy? My passion for the African continent is undiluted. My understanding is still limited. I am here as a student. I will not stop learning because you don't like the way I think. MDC is not the only thinking machine in the world. ZANU-PF cannot be the only solution that is in the world. I believe there are solutions that are within ZANU-PF. There are solutions that are within MDC. And if these systems can stop politics and start talking national strategy, we can build this country faster in the south than anybody else. Next to Congo, Zimbabwe could be one of the richest countries in the SADC region. And we know why the Western world does not want Zimbabwe to become stable. Because our stability will destabilize their economic benefits within the colonial governments they've put in the south. So watch the space as we begin to put our minds on our resources. The agenda is about to change. The system is about to change. Politics is about to change. We want a country for its citizens, and we want citizens for the continent. With those few words, here is my life story. I am bread and butter of the greatest Zimbabwe kingdom in the Soshe tribe. Brought up as a minister, working now in the political and social, spiritual re-engineering space. If you have an idea or a suggestion as to how I must do that, please share your suggestions with me. My soul belongs to nobody. No one owns my conscience. I am born here for a purpose. And until I fulfill that purpose, I will live. Then I will die. Thank you.